Hey guys. So, I got a question for you. Are you interested in any merchandise? I could make t shirts with the YesPhonics, some sort of cool YesPhonics logo on it. Probably going to be kind of like the logo on the intro of the video. So, let me know your response. I can make hats, t shirts, underwear, whatever you guys want, really. So, let me know in the comment section below. I'm Verlynn Adamson, your host of the YesPhonics channel, and we're back. And this is where homeschoolers, teachers, and educators everywhere, they come for valuable teaching information and insights. And today's topic is going to be how to teach phonograms part 3. And in this 3-part series, you've already seen how to teach circle letters. You saw how to teach non-circle letters, as well as getting a taste of the mnemonics, the mnemonic phonic technique, and how to actually write all of these phonograms. And today, we're going to focus on the multi-letter phonograms of the rest of the 72 Orton phonograms. So I hope you guys enjoy this, and let's dive right in. So a few key pointers for you guys is teaching the alphabet phonograms first. You can refer to parts 1 and 2 of this video series. These help lay the foundation in letter formation, aka manuscript writing, or aka printing, as well as with reading, spelling, and writing those particular sounds. And the rest of the phonograms are referred to as multi-letter phonograms or sounds, hence this 3-part video series, this particular part. Now, all the Orton-Spalding methods, or I guess the Orton-Spalding method and the Writing Road to Reading, they take the clutter out of learning English and the English language itself, which is really awesome. And at YesPhonics, we try to take even more of the clutter out of your lives to help plan great lessons and have great free resources to use for you, your students, or your children. And whenever the alphabet sounds combine to make new sounds, they are taught as multi-letter phonograms. If the sounds remain the same when they are joined with others, they are not taught again. So some examples will make this a lot clearer. Examples when the phonogram ah, oh, ooh, or ah, oh, ooh, ox over, love to, come into contact with the phonogram ducks use output, which would be you, when those two come together as the O and the U, the OU makes 4 other sounds. So, and I'll show this all on paper for you guys so it kind of makes a little more sense. But we always underline multi-letter phonograms while building the word list. And I talked a little bit in the last video about the Ayers word list, and I will at some point go through the Ayers word list for you guys, especially for all my English as a second language learners out there. You can learn words right along with me as I take you and guide you through the world of English. So that is to come, but for now we're going to concentrate on these multi-letter phonograms. However, one thing is when the letters join together that do not make new sounds, such as the phonograms as in Susie and the t as in tot or teacher totter, and they come together and make st. We do not reteach the st as a separate sound. Students, they already know how to say s and t, and it's not necessary to teach them again. So it's really important for students to get that there's single letter phonograms and they can be blended together, not making an entirely new phonogram. Now, here's a little checklist for you guys. And remember to write each phonogram 5 times, as mentioned in the last video, and not in a rote way. When needed, reinforce the language learned, such as the top line, the base line, and the points on the circle. So the language learned is the language within the 4-point circle system. If somebody forgets the top line or the midline or the baseline, it never hurts to remind a student what that particular midline or top line or bottom line or baseline is called. And tip number 2 for you guys on this pointer list is review previously learned phonograms every day. So again, if you're introducing 2 to 4 phonograms per day, review those 2 to 4 phonograms per day. And you don't have to choose all 30, 50, or 70. Again, like I mentioned in the last video, feel free to just review the phonograms that you guys introduced the previous day and keep doing that for the remainder. Now, if you get into like day 10 and you've already introduced, let's say, 40 phonograms, you could review all those 40 phonograms if they are needed, but at that point, a lot of students are already going to know how to say and sound out most of those phonograms, making that particular review for all of the phonograms unnecessary. But some of this can be prescribed on an as-you-go basis with your students. Some students may need more review. Other students might not need as much review. So kind of gauge that and keep that in mind. So another key pointer on this list, you guys, is don't let too much time lapse before reviewing the older phonograms. And this might sound contradictory to what I just said, but it's important. You gotta kind of fine line. You know, you can introduce 40 phonograms, 4 per day, over 10 days, but make sure you're not spending too much time not reviewing the phonograms either. So you gotta walk that fine line. And now, for the rest of the phonograms. All right, you guys, the phonogram sh. She fishes for friendship. So this phonogram is used at the beginning of a word, for example, she. It can also be used at the end of a syllable, for example, fishes, but it can't be used at the beginning of any syllable. So a caveat here would be it can't be used at the beginning of any syllable after the first one. The example here would be nation, completely different phonogram. TI is used for this. However, except for the ending ship. So there's a few different caveats here, but in general, it can be used at the beginning of a syllable and at the end of a syllable, but not at the end of any syllable or at the beginning of any syllable. Kind of one of those strange phonograms that kind of gets a bad rep, but nevertheless, she fishes for friendship. E. Peek. Now, double E always says E, peeking through a looking glass. 3 of them. So A, 2-letter A that we may use at the end of English words. So when you guys hear me saying this, we can use at the end of English words. That is going to be on the back of your phonogram flashcards, and you always want to say that because there's some phonograms that we can use at the end of English words, and there's others that we cannot. So A, 2-letter A, as in play, that we may use at the end of English words. A, 2-letter A, as in sail, that we may not use at the end of English words. So this one of these phonograms that we cannot use at the end of English words, even though it says the same sound as the previously mentioned phonogram, it is a different phonogram. And I should say that we will be underlining all of these multi-letter phonograms, you guys. Ow, O, that we may use at the end of English words. Cowboy show. Ow, O, oo, Ow, O, oo, that we may not use at the end of English words. So for some examples for these phonograms, ow, o, oo, sound, soul, youth, trouble. Moving on to ah. Ah of la. Ah, la. Auto la. That we may use at the end of English words. We can use this one at the end of English words, you guys. Ah, auto, that we may not use at the end of English words. So autola, that we may not use at the end of English words. Ooh, you, brew a few. So this just reminds me of brewing a few tea bags in a little teapot or your cup. I like peppermint. What kind of tea do you like, Brandon?
Evening in Missoula.
Evening in Missoula. I just had that yesterday, actually. That's such a good tea. So we may use this at the end of English words. Ooh, you. Brew a few. We can use this one at the end of English words. Fruit juice. So this one is ooh, you. Ooh, you. Fruit juice that we may not use at the end of English words. We cannot use this one at the end of English words. Oi. That we may use at the end of English words. We can use this one at the end of English words. So, noisy boy. Oi. So, we may not use this phonogram at the end of English words. Even though it has the same sound as the last one, this phonogram right here cannot be used at the end of English words. So the example would be noisy boy. Noisy. Oo, o. Oo, o. Foolish crook at the door. So, foolish crook at the door. Oo, o. Ch, k, sh. And this is for all of my students out there. Ch, k, sh, ch, k, sh. It's kind of like a train, you know. Ch, k, sh, ch, k, sh, ch, k, sh. So, some words for you guys that you could associate this sound with is child, school, and chef. Ch, k, sh. Sing a long song. And I'm over enunciating these, you guys, so you can hear the sounds, and all of my fellow ESL students can hear these sounds. Sing a long song. So used at the end of a word or syllable. E, a. E, a. Eating bread is great. So e, a. Eating bread is great. R. The R of car. I just want to be a pirate whenever I say that one. R. Yeah. R. The R of car. K. Two-letter K, as in prick a pickle. This is used at the end of a root word after a single vowel that says a, that says a, e, I, a. A, e, I. So all those vowel sounds. A, e, I. So you can use this word, you can use this phonogram at the end of a root word after a single vowel that says a, e, I. So prick a pickle. D. So this is a difficult one. I always want to say the mnemonics, the words. Spotted. So d. Starred. So there's a little bit of a difference here, and you really got to pay attention to notice it. Spotted, starred, striped. So spotted, starred, striped. So ed, d, t. Ed, d, t. So think of shirts. Spotted, starred, striped. Or. Form a sword. Or. Form a sword. Whale. Whisper to a whale. Whisper to a whale. Oh. So O, two-letter O, that we may not use at the end of English words. So this one we cannot use at the end of English words. Toad on a boat. I gotta show you guys this one. This one makes me crack up too. It's a toad on the boat. This is O, two-letter O, tiptoe, that we may use at the end of English words. So I like to think about it like I'm sneaking at night, getting them cookies. The of first. So the of first. Her first nurse works early on her journey. And as you guys are going to see, there's a whole series of these phonograms that we use the her first nurse works early on her journey. This whole mnemonic phrase is of every single phonogram that says in the caption, okay? So you'll notice this. The of first. So first. The of nurse. The of nurse. Her first nurse works early on her journey. The of works. The of works. Her first nurse works early on her journey. Her first nurse works early on her journey. The of early. The of early. Her first nurse works early on her journey. The of journey. The of journey. Her first nurse works early on her journey. A, E. A, E. They have the honey. And we may use this at the end of English words. That we may use at the end of English works. They have the honey. A, E. A, E. That we may not use at the end of English words. A, E. That we may not use at the end of English words. As in, their leisure. Four-letter A. A. Four-letter A. As in, 8 freight cars. 8 freight cars. E, I. E, I. Piece of pie. Apple is the best, yes. E, I. E, I. Piece of pie. I. 3-letter I. I. 3-letter I. Night light. 2-letter used only at the beginning of a root word. 2-letter used only at the beginning of a root word. Night's knockout. 2-letter gnat sign. 2-letter used both at the beginning and at the end of a root word. Gnat sign. 2-letter 2-letter right. Used only at the beginning of a root word. 2-letter used only at the beginning of a root word. So don't write wrong. Don't write wrong. 2-letter 2-letter photograph. Photograph. And actually, this is I drew this when I was very, very young, and it was actually of my grandma, and it turned out to not be a great.
So you drew that picture?
I drew this picture way back in the day. 3-letter J. J. Hodgepodge. 3-letter J. J. Used only at the end of a root word after a single vowel that says a, e, I, Okay? So it's only can be used at the end of a root word that after a single vowel that says a, e, I, So hodgepodge. Think of a bunch of stuff. This isn't a hodgepodge. Ch. Ch. 3-letter ch. Used only at the end of a root word after a single vowel that says a, e, I, So exactly the same as hodgepodge. Used only at the end of a root word after a single vowel that says a, e, I, So, for example, pitcher. So, sh, tall letter sh, nation. Sh, tall letter sh, used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. Nation. Sh, z, sh, z. Used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. Mansion, excursion. Sh, z, sh, z, sh. Short letter sh. Used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. Short letter sh. Short letter sh. Used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. Special, social. All right, you guys, moving on. O, oo, uff, off, ah, ow. O, oo, uff, off, ah, ow. So, you guys, this is learned in pairs, and we actually do have a great mnemonic for this. It's of a skier falling down a hill, like me when I was trying to learn how to ski.
Right on your butt.
Right on your butt. O, oo, ah, ow. So you guys can kind of do that for your class, for your students or your kids. It's funny. And
give them a giggle.
Yeah, give them a giggle. It'll be funny. So oh, ooh, uff, off, ah, ow. So these are learned in pairs, you guys. Don't be overwhelmed by how many sounds there are to this one. Just learn them in pairs. Oh, ooh, uff, off, ah, ow. G, g, g of guilty guy. It's kind of like the tiptoe guy sneaking around for cookies.
He's a guilty guy.
He's a guilty guy sneaking around for cookies. All right, and that's it for the video presentation for the phonograms. We're going to jump right into the writing portion of that, you guys. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy. So we're going to start right at the midline, and we're going to circle over to 2, and we're going to curve on around down to the bass line, and then circle back up to 3. So if I were to write in the numbers here, we're going to have a little 2 here and a little 3 here. And there's a little 1 and a little 4 here. So you could say start at the midline, right by 1, circle over to 2, swish right on around down to 4 to the bass line, and then curve right back over to 3. And then for the H, the SH, we're going to start right almost at the top line. We're going to go straight down past the midline, down to the bass line. We're going to retrace back around to 2, on over to 1, and back down to 4 to the bass line. So that's the phonogram sh, and then we'd go ahead and underline that because it's a multiple letter phonogram. So for this, we're going to start, and as you can see, we've got a reference chart over here, so you can always look over to see what this is. So we could put a little 1 right here, and then we can put this 2 right here, and then we can put the 4 on down here. So we're going to start right by 2, and then we're going to circle on over to 1, across the midline, circle back to 2, and circle on around to 4 down to the bass line. And you can write this again as such, and you can definitely show your students this as well. This is how you do it, you guys. Just start right there and circle on around and make those double E's. Now for the next phonogram. 3 of them. So we're going to start at the top line here. We're going to trace down to the bottom line, and we're going to lift and cross on the midline. And then we're going to start back up at the top line for the phonogram. We're going to start at the top line, trace on down to the bottom line. We're going to retrace back and circle around over the midline and back down to the bass line. We are then going to underline this phonogram because it's a multi-letter phonogram. So for this particular phonogram, for A, 2-letter A, we're going to start with the A. We're going to start at 1, right on the midline, and we're going to circle around back down all the way to 3, and then we're going to circle around back up to 1, and then down to the bass line. And then we're going to start at the Y, and we're going to start at the midline. We're going to go down on past 3, we're going to circle around past 4, back up to the midline, and then we're going to go down, and we're going to circle back around and make that little dip there. So AY. There's your phonogram AY. So ow, o, cow, show. And we may use this phonogram at the end of English words. So let's go ahead and write it. This is going to be the O. So we are going to start at 1 on the midline, and we're going to circle around past 2, back down past 3, over to 4, and back around to 1 on the midline. There's our O, and our W is just going to be 2 V's like we did in the last video. So we're going to start at the midline, slant down to the bass line, back up, slant back down, and back up to the midline. Now, this is really important. We're going to underline this phonogram because it's a multi-letter phonogram. We would also put a 2 over it if we were going to signify that it had 2 sounds, as in show. So ow, cowboy show. So cowboy is its first sound. Show is its second sound. So if we were signifying show, we'd put a 2 above it. This is that karate action we were talking about earlier in the video. And for this, we may not use this particular phonogram at the end of English words. And what we're going to do for this one, we are just going to do exactly like we did on the last one. We're going to start right at 1 on the midline. We're going to circle around past 2, past 3, past 4, and back around to the midline to 1. And then we are going to, for this one, we're going to start at the midline, and we're going to go down to 3. We're going to circle around to 4 and trace up to the midline and back down to the bass line. And this is how you're going to, and again, you guys, this is how you're going to be dictating this
to your students exactly the way I'm saying it. You can mix up the verbiage if you want, but I suggest just going by the script and just going like this. And then we're going to underline this multi-letter phonogram just like that. And now, this is again important. If we were going to signify that this had 3 sounds, which it does, if we were going to signify that it was the word soul, O, we would put a 2 above it. If we were going to signify that it was the word youth, its 3rd sound, we'd put a 3 above it. If we were going to signify that it was the 4th sound, we would put a 4 above it to signify trouble. So the first sound is sound, and the second sound is soul, 3rd, youth, 4th, trouble. Ah of la. So this phonogram, we may use this one at the end of English words, as in auto-la. So to write this one, we're going to start at 1 on the midline, and then we're going to circle around past 2, down to 3 to the baseline, and then we're going to go circle right on back up to the midline, and then down to the baseline. And that's your A right there. And then for the W, or again, we're just going to do 2 V's. We're just going to start at the midline, slant down to the baseline, slant back up to the midline, and then slant back down to the baseline, and then back up to the midline. And now we're going to underline this phonogram. It is a multi-letter phonogram. It only has 1 sound, so you don't need to put any letters, or you don't need to put any numbers above the phonogram. So this is the ah of auto. This is the ah of auto that we may not use at the end of English words, you guys. So we're going to go ahead and write this phonogram out. We're going to start at 1 on the midline, circle around past 2, down to 3, and we're going to circle around past 4, up back to the midline, and then we're going to trace down to the midline. We're going to trace down to the baseline. And then for the U, we are going to start right at the midline, and we're going to go straight down to 3, and we're going to circle around past 4, back up to the midline, and then back down to the baseline. And we're going to underline this, obviously, because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it's only 1 sound, so we don't need any numbers above the phonogram. Brew a few that we may use at the end of English words. For the E, we are going to start right below the baseline at the 2, and then we're going to go straight across the 1, and we're going to circle around right on the midline, back over to 2, and then we're going to circle past 3, and on over to 4, and end right there at the little curve. And for the W, again, we're just going to do a slant. We're going to start at the midline, slant down to the baseline, slant back up to the midline, and then slant back down to the baseline. 1 more time, slant back up to the midline. Now we're going to underline this, and this is a multi-letter phonogram, so it gets the underline, but it also has 2 sounds. So if I wanted to signify the second sound, as in few, then I'd put a 2 above it. Now, if I wanted to just signify that it was the first sound, as in brew, I would not put anything above it. All right, this is oo, you, that we may not use at the end of English words. So this is fruit juice. So we're going to go ahead and write this one, you guys. We are going to start with the U, obviously, and we're going to start at the midline. We're going to trace down to 3 to the baseline, and we're going to circle around past 4, back up to the midline, and then trace right back down to the baseline. That's your U. And then we're going to do the I, which is just starting at the midline, and then you just trace right down to the baseline, and then lift your pencil and dot. Now we are going to underline this because it's a multi-letter phonogram. And if you wanted to signify the second sound, as in juice, you'd just put a 2 right above it. And again, if it was the first sound, you wouldn't put any sounds above it. Or, any numbers above it. We are going to, this phonogram we may use at the end of English words. So, noisy boy. So we're going to start with the O. We are just going to start at 1 on the midline, and we're going to circle around past 2, down to 3 on the baseline, and then past 4, back up to the midline. And now for the Y, we're just going to start at the midline and trace down to 3, over to 4, back up to the midline, trace back down to the baseline, past 4, and put this little dip on it there, this little curve. And this is a multi-letter phonogram, so we're going to go ahead and underline it. And this particular phonogram, only has 1 sound, so there is no numbers above it. All right, this is oi in the word noisy. So you just saw a previous phonogram that was really, really similar. a little different on the lettering, obviously, but it makes the same sound, but it's the sound of noisy. We may not use this at the end of English words. So we'll just start like we did with the O. We're going to start at the midline, right at 1, and we're going to circle around past 3, over to 4, past 4, back up to the midline. And for the I, we're just going to start at the midline, and we're just going to trace right down to the baseline, lift, and dot. And we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, obviously. It only has one sound, so we don't put any numbers above it. So this phonogram is oo, o. Oo, o. Foolish crook at the door. So we're going to go ahead and write this phonogram. It's just 2 O's. So we're going to start at the midline, right at 1, and we're going to circle around past 2, past 3, down to the baseline, past 4, back up to the midline to 1. And we're going to do the same exact thing once again. And we're going to double underline this, and this is a multi-letter phonogram, obviously, so we underline it. But if we want to signify that it's the first sound, as in foolish, we'd have it just like that. If we wanted to signify that it was the second sound that it makes, as in crook, we'd put a 2 above it. Now, if we want to signify that it's the third sound, as in door, we'd put a 3 above it. All right, this is ch, k, sh, ch, k, sh, as in child, school, and chef. Now let's go ahead and write this phonogram. So with C, we're going to start at 1 on the midline, and we're going to circle on around past 2, all the way past 3, on over to the baseline, and then we're going to end right at 4 there. And then for this phonogram, we are going to start right above the midline, almost at the top line. And then for the H, we're going to start up top past the midline, almost the top line. We're going to go down all the way to the baseline, and then we're going to circle back up past 2 on the midline, and right over to 1, and then we're going to go on down to 4 right there. And we're going to underline this phonogram because it is a multi-letter phonogram, and if we wanted to signify that it was its first sound, we would leave it just like this with the underline. But if we wanted to signify the sound of k, as in school, we would put a 2 above it. Now, if we want to signify that it was its third sound, as in chef, we would put a 3 above it. All right, you guys, this is sing. So sing a long song used at the end of a word or syllable. And let's go ahead and write this bad boy. We are going to start right here at the midline, and we're going to trace down to the baseline, and we're going to trace back up past 2 on the midline, over to 1, back down to the baseline to 4. And then for the G, we are going to start at 1 right on the midline, and then we're going to circle on over past 2, down to 3, on over to 4, back up to 1 to the midline, and then back down past 4 with a little curve or dip or flag, whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it only has one sound, so we wouldn't put any numbers above. All right, you guys, this is the phonogram E-eh-a. E-eh-a. Eating bread is great. So for this one, for the E, we're going to start right under the midline. We're going to start right here at 2, and we're going to trace straight over to 1, and then we're going to circle on back over to 2, and then we are going to go on down past 3, on over to 4 to the baseline. And just again, as a reminder, you guys, this is how the 4-point circle system works. Is we got 1, we've got 2, we've got 3, and we've got 4, and it's just a circle. We would then write the A, of course. We're going to start right here at 1. We're going to go on over to 2, down past 3, over to 4, back up to the midline, and down to the baseline again. We would underline it because it's a double phonogram. And if we wanted to signify its first sound, eating, we would just leave it right like it is. If we wanted to signify its second sound, as in as in bread, we'd put a 2 above it. And if we wanted to signify that its third sound, as in A, great, we would put a 3 above it. All right, this is the R of car. The R of car. So what we're going to do here, you guys, is we are going to start at 1. We are going to start right on the midline, and we're going to circle on over to 2, past 3, on over to 4, back up to the midline, and back down to the baseline to 4. And then we're going to, with the R, we are going to start right here at 2, go down to the baseline, and then trace back up and go right on over to 1 and end it right there with a little hook. And then we'll underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it only has one sound. So no numbers necessary. All right, you guys, one of my favorites, prick a pickle. So this is k, two-letter k. It's used only at the end of a root word, after a single vowel that says a, e, I, or So this is k, two-letter k, k, two-letter k, as in prick a pickle. So what we're going to do for C is we're going to start at 1, and we are going to circle on over past 2, but we're going to curve it past 3, on down to 4, and end right there. And then for the K, we're going to start up past the midline, almost to the top line, and we are going to go down all the way to the baseline. We're going to lift. We're going to start right above the midline, slant in to touch the line, and then we're going to slant back down to the baseline. And then we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it's only one sound, so there's no numbers necessary. All right, so this is ed, d, t, ed, d, t, spotted, starred, striped. So we'll start with the E right under the midline, right at 2. We're going to trace right over to 1, and then circle back around to 2, past 3, on over to 4 to the baseline. And for the D, we're going to go ahead and start at 1, and we're going to circle on past to 2, pass down 3, and then we're going to hit the baseline there, and we're going to trace straight back up to the midline to 1 there, almost up to the top of the top line, and back down to the baseline. Now, we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and if we want to signify, obviously, again, if it's the first sound, we don't put a letter above it, or excuse me, we don't put a number above it. If we want to signify the second sound in starred, as in d, then we'd put a 2 above it. And if we wanted to signify the third sound, as in t, as in striped, then we'd put a 3 above it. All right, this is or, as in form, or, as in form, form a sword. So this one is pretty straightforward. We are going to start with the O, and we are going to start right at 1. We're going to circle right on the midline. We're going to circle past 2, past 3, on over to 4, back up to the midline to 1. And then for the R, we're going to start right there at 2. Going to go down to the baseline. We're going to retrace back up to 2, past 2, on the midline, ending at 1. We're going to underline this because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and there is only one sound, so it does not need a number. Whale. Whisper to a whale. So this one here, you guys, we are going to start, we're just going to make a double V is what we're going to do here. So we're going to start right at the midline. We're going to slant down to the baseline, slant back up to the midline, excuse me, and then we're going to slant back down the baseline and one more time back up to the midline. And then we are going to start for the H, for the H, we are going to start right almost to the top line, or we're going to trace right down past the midline to the baseline, and we're going to trace back up to the midline, past 2, on over to 1, and right on down to 4. And we're going to underline that bad boy because it is a multi-letter phonogram, but it only has one sound, so there's no numbers necessary. All right, this is two-letter O. Two-letter O, as in boat. O, two-letter O, that we may not use at the end of English words. And this is for a reference, for a mnemonic reference, toad on the boat. And we are going to start at 1 on the midline. We're going to circle on over past 2, past 3, right on around 4 to the baseline, and back on up to the midline to 1. And for the A, we are going to start at 1 here, circle on the midline. We're going to circle past 2, past 3, down to the baseline, past 4, back up to the midline to 1, and then trace right back down to 4. We're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, obviously, but it does not need any numbers because it only has one sound. All right, this is a similar phonogram, two-letter O. Two-letter O, as in toe, tiptoe. O, two-letter O, that we may use at the end of English words. So for this one, we are going to go ahead and start, again, like we did last time, start at the 1, right on the midline, circle on over past 2, past 3, down to the baseline, over to 4, and right back up to the midline to 1. And for the E, we're going to start right under the midline, and we are going to start at 2, and we're going to make a straight line on over to 1. We're going to circle back around to 2, down past 3, on over to 4. We're going to end right there with a little curve, and we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, but it only has one sound, so it does not need a number. All right, you guys, so this is the first phonogram in a series of phonograms in the mnemonic catchphrase, her first nurse works early on her journey. So, this is the of first, the of first, in first. So what we're going to do is we are going to start at the midline, and we're going to trace right down to the baseline, lift the pencil and dot. And we are going to then go right here, and we're going to start at the midline at 2. We're going to go trace straight down to the baseline, back up to 2, circle on over to 1 with a little hook, and we're going to end it. And then we're going to underline this phonogram because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it's only one sound. So we only need to underline it. We don't need any numbers above it. And this is the second phonogram in the series of Her First Nurse Works Early on Her Journey, the of nurse. The of nurse. Her first nurse works early on her journey. So for this one, we are going to start right at the midline, right at 2, and trace straight down to 3 to the baseline, circle on over past 4, up to the midline to 1, back down to 4 to the baseline. And with this R, for the phonogram R, we are going to start at 2. But mind you, this is a multi-letter phonogram. I'm just using the R for reference for the R. We're going to start right at 2. We're going to trace down to the baseline, trace back up to the number 2, and circle on to the midline, right around, make that little hook for the end of the writing. And then we're going to underline it, because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it does not need any numbers because it's only one sound. It only has one sound. All right, this is the third phonogram in the series of Her First Nurse Works Early on Her Journey. So, this is the of works. The of work. We will write the right one. So for the W, we're going to start on the baseline, and we're going to slant down. We're going to make a double U. We're going to slant down to the baseline, slant back up to the midline, slant back down to the baseline, and back up to the midline. I feel like an announcer of sorts here. And now we are going to write the O. We're going to start right on the midline, right at 1, circle around past 2, past 3, down to the baseline, to 4, and then back up to 1. And then this one, we are going to start right at the midline, right at 2. We're going to trace straight down, trace straight back up past 2, all the way over to 1 on the midline, and make that little hook. And we're going to underline this because it's a multi-letter phonogram. And it has no more sounds than the one sound it makes. And so, just so you guys know, I underlined the full thing, and technically, you'd only want to underline this OR right here. This OR. Okay, we just put the W for reference here, so you just want to underline the OR there. Yes, this is the fourth one in the series of Her First Nurse Works Early on Her Journey. So for this one, this phonogram, we are going to start right at 2, right under the midline. We're going to circle on over to 1, and we're going to circle back on the midline, on over to, down to the baseline, past 3, on over to 4, and we're going to end right there. And then for this one, we are going to start right at 1. We're going to circle on over to 2, past 3, down to the baseline, right on over, past 4, back up to the midline, back down to the baseline to 4. And then we're going to start here right at the midline, and we are going to start at 2. We're going to trace down to the baseline to 3, and then we're going to trace back up to 2, and then circle on right over the midline, make that little hook to 1. And then we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it only has one sound. All right, this is the of journey in the series of Her First Nurse Works Early on Her Journey. Right at 1 on the midline, and we're going to circle on over past 2, down to the baseline, past 3, on over to 4, past 4, and go back up to 1 to the midline. And then we are going to start right here at the baseline, right at 2, and trace down. We're going to start at the midline at 2, trace down to the baseline, past 3, make a little circle right past 4, and back up to the midline. And then we're going to end right at 4 there, right on the baseline. And then for the R, we're going to start right at 2 on the midline, and we're going to trace down. We're going to trace back up to 2, right around to 1, make that little hook. And we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram. And again, it only has one sound, so no numbers necessary. All right, this is AE. AE AE that we may use at the end of English words. They have the honey. So we are going to start right at 2 under the midline and trace right across to 1, circle on over to the midline, and then pass 2 down to 3, curve on over to 4, and end right on the baseline there. And for this, we are going to start right at 2 on the midline, trace down past 3. We're going to curve on over past the 4, back up to the midline to 1, and then we're going to trace straight back down past 4, past the baseline, and make this little curve, this little hook there. All right, this is the AE, in their leisure. This is AE that we may not use at the end of English words. We cannot use this at the end of English words, but we can write it. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to start right under the midline, right at 2, and we're going to circle right on over to, we're going to trace straight on over to 1. We're going to circle back on over to 2, right down to the baseline, past 3, and we're going to go on over to 4, and we're going to end right there. And for I, we're just going to start at the midline. I'm going to just trace straight down to the baseline, lift, and dot with a pencil. And we'll underline it. And I forgot to underline the last one, you guys. It is a multi-letter phonogram. This one only has one sound. So it's just, it has 2 sounds. Forget what I said. It's 2 sounds on they have the honey. So if I wanted to signify that this phonogram, I'm confusing you guys. If I wanted to signify that this phonogram had 2 sounds, then I'd put the 2 over the E as in honey. But if it was just the first sound as in they, I would leave it blank like that. But if I wanted to signify that it's the second sound as in honey, I'd put a 2 above it. Now back over to this. We're just gonna do some magic here. Back over to this phonogram, it does have 2 sounds. So if I wanted to signify its first sound as in there, I'd leave it blank. But if I wanted to signify the second sound as in leisure, I'd put a 2 above it. Alright, this is 4-letter A, as in 8. 4-letter A, 8. And you can look at this, 8 freight cars. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and write this phonogram out. We are going to start right at 2. We're going to trace straight across to 1. We're going to circle on the midline, on over to 2, down to 3 on the baseline, right on over to 4, and end right there. For the I, we're going to start right at the midline. We're going to trace straight down to the baseline, lift, dot. For this, we are going to start right at 1. We're going to circle on the midline, on past 2, past 3, down to the baseline. Right here at 4, we're going to trace straight back up to 1, and then we're going to come down past 4 again, and we're going to make this little hook. And then we are going to start past the midline, right up close to the top line here, and we are going to trace straight on down to the baseline. We're going to trace straight back up, right on around past 2, on over to 1, and back down to 4 on the baseline. And we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it only has 1 sound. All right, this is a great phonogram. This is EI, EI, piece of pie, the pie that we eat backwards, kind of like I was explaining in the video. The EI, that's its sound sequence in the order of its use frequency, but it's spelled backwards as compared to its order of use frequency. So hopefully I'm not confusing you guys too much with this, but if we wanted to write this phonogram, we're going to go ahead and start right here at the midline. We're going to trace straight down to the baseline, lift and dot, and then we're going to start right here, right at 2. We're going to right on the midline. We're going to trace straight on over to 1, and then we're going to circle around on the midline, past 2, past 3, on over to 4, and end right there. And we'll underline it. And this phonogram does have 2 sounds. So if you wanted to signify the first sound as in piece, you would leave it blank with no numbers. If you wanted to signify the second sound as in pie, just put a little 2 right above it. Alright, this is 3-letter I. 3-letter I. As in light. So we're going to go ahead and write this phonogram out. So we're going to start right here at the midline. We're going to trace straight down to the baseline, lift and dot. And now we're going to start right here at 1 on the midline. And we're going to circle on over past 2, on down to 3 to the baseline. And then keep circling right past 4, back up to 1. And then we're going to trace straight back down to past 4, past the baseline, and end with that little hook, that little curve. And then we are going to start past the midline, right up close to the top line, and we're going to trace straight down to the baseline, and then we're going to circle back on past 2, on around to 1, and then back down to 4, and right there on the baseline. And we'll underline it because it is a multi-letter phonogram, and it only has one sound. All right, this is n, 2-letter n, as in night's knockout. Now this is used only at the beginning of a root word. So for this one, we are going to start right at the top, near the top line. We're going to trace straight on down to the baseline. We're going to lift the pencil, start at the midline, right there at 1, and we're going to slant in, touch the line, and then we're going to slant back out down to 4 to the baseline. And then for this end, we're going to start right here, right on the baseline, trace straight on down to the baseline, and then we're going to trace right back up to the midline and circle on around to 1 and back down to 4 on the baseline. And we're going to underline this because it is a multi-letter phonogram, but it only has one sound, so there's no numbers necessary. This is 2-letter n, gnat sign. So n, 2-letter n, used both at the beginning and at the end of a root word. And we're going to go ahead and write this. So we're going to start at 1 right on the midline, and we're going to circle on over to 2, past 2, down to 3 on the baseline, past 3, on over to 4, and then we're going to circle back up to 1, and we're going to go down to the baseline again, past 4, and then with this little curve or little hook there. And for the end, we're going to start right at the baseline right here, right at 2, trace straight down to 3 on the baseline, and then we are going to trace straight back up, past 2, on around to 1, and down straight to the baseline to 4. And we're going to underline this phonogram because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it only has one sound, so there are no numbers necessary. 2-letter 2-letter as in right. 2-letter used only at the beginning of a root word. We're going to start right here at the midline, and we're going to circle right. We're going to trace straight down to the baseline, right down to 3 here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to make 2 V's, and then we're going to slant right on back up to the midline, and then we're going to slant back down to the baseline, and then we're going to slant back up to the midline. And now for the R, we're going to go ahead and start right at the midline, and we're going to trace straight down to the baseline, and then trace straight back up from where we came, past 2, on the midline, right around to 1 there. And we'll underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it does not have multiple sounds. It's only one sound, so we don't need any numbers above it. 2-letter, as in photo. So we're going to go ahead and start right here at 2 on the midline, and we're going to trace straight down past 3, down past the baseline. We are then, you can trace straight back up, which I recommend, or you can lift. You can go from here and you can lift, but it's easier to teach students to just trace straight back up, back to 2, and then circle around on the midline, past 1, all the way past 4, back around to 3 on the baseline. And then we'll start right here above the midline, right here at 2, and trace straight down to the midline to 3, and then we're going to trace straight back up, and we're going to circle around on the midline right there, down past 1, and then down to 4 there on the baseline. And we'll underline this because it's a multi-letter phonogram, but it only has one sound, so we don't need any numbers above it. 3-letter J. 3-letter J. Used only at the end of a root word, after a single vowel that says a, I, a. Okay, so it's only used at the end of a root word after a single vowel that says a, a. Hodgepodge. So we'll go ahead and write this out. We're going to start right here at 1, right below the midline, and we're going to circle right on the midline over to 2, past 3 on the baseline, on past 4, and we're going to come back up to 1, and we're going to go right above the midline, almost to the top line, and then we're going to trace straight back down and end a little curve there. And then you're going to start right here at 1 on the midline, circle on over past 2, down to 3 on the baseline, right on over to 4 on the baseline, back up to 1 on the midline, and then down past 4, and we're going to make a little hook there. And then for this, we're going to go ahead and start right here at 2, right under the midline, and we're going to circle on over to 1, and then we're going to circle on the midline, past 1, past 2, on down to 3 on the baseline, and then on over to 4, and we'll end it right there. And we'll underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, and it only has one sound, so no numbers needed. 3-letter ch, ch. 3-letter ch, used only at the end of a root word after a single vowel that says a, I, Okay, so same as hodgepodge. It's the same thing, used only at the end of a root word after a single vowel that says a, I. Alright, so let's go ahead and write this out. So for this one, we're going to start right at the top, right above the midline, almost at the top line, and we're going to go straight down to the baseline. We're going to lift, and we're going to cross right on the midline. And then we're going to start right here at 1. We're going to, right on the midline, we're going to circle on over past 2. We're going to curve on around down to the baseline past 3 and end on 4 on the baseline. Now we're going to start right here at the top, right above the midline, almost at the top line. And we're going to go straight on down to the baseline. And then we're going to retrace back up right to 2. And then we're going to circle around right on over to 1 on the midline. And then back down to the baseline to 4. And then we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, but it only has one sound. So no numbers necessary. Sh. Tall letter sh, as in nation. So this is used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. Okay, this is really important. It's used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. So let's go ahead and write this. So we're going to start right above the midline, almost at the top line, and we're going to trace straight down to the baseline. We're going to lift the pencil and cross right on the midline. And then for this, we're going to start right at the midline, and we're going to trace straight down to the baseline, lift, and dot. And then we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, but it only has one sound, so there are no numbers necessary. Sh, z. Used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. Mansion, excursion. So let's go ahead and write this. We're going to start right here, and we're going to circle on over right over to 2. But then we're going to kind of do this little snake deal, and we're going to curve right on past over back to 1, and then we're going to circle curve again right on back down to 3. And then for this, we're going to start right at the baseline, and we're going to go down to the midline, lift, and dot. And we will underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram. However, this phonogram does have 2 sounds. So if we wanted to signify that it's first sound, as in sh in mansion, then we'd leave it without a number. But if we wanted to signify that it was its second sound, as in z, as in excursion, then we'd put a 2 above it. Short letter sh. Short letter sh, used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. Used at the beginning of any syllable after the first syllable. So special, social. So we're going to go ahead and write this. We're going to start right here at 1, right at the midline. We're going to curve on over past 2, past 3, down to the baseline, and on over to 4 and end right there, right above the baseline. And then we're going to start right here at the midline and trace right down to the baseline, lift, and dot. And we're going to underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram, but it only has one sound, so no number necessary. All right, you guys, we're nearing the end of the multi-letter phonograms, and this is a great one. This should be learned in pairs, though. This is o, oo, uff, off, aw, ow. O, oo, uff, off, aw, ow. Again, learn it in pairs. Learn the o, oo first, introduce that, and then when they've got that, introduce the uff, off, and then when they've got that, introduce the ah, ow. And it's pretty simple from there. So we're going to go ahead and write this phonogram. We're going to start right here at 1 on the midline, circle on past 2, down to 3. This is a funky little O. I'm starting a little higher. We'll circle on past 3, down to the baseline, past 4, and back up to 1 on the midline. And then we're going to start here right at 2. And we're going to trace straight down to the baseline to 3, and then we're going to curve past 4 on the baseline and back up to 1 on the midline, and then we're going to trace straight down back to 4 on the baseline. And then for this right here, we're going to start right here at 1. We're going to, on the midline, we're going to circle on over past 2, down to 3 on the baseline, back up past 4 on the baseline, back up to a 1 on the midline, and then we're going to trace straight back down to the baseline and do this little hook there. And then at the top here, we're going to start right almost at the top line, trace straight down, and we're going to trace straight back up, and then circle on over back to 1, down to 4 on the baseline. And then we'll underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram. And obviously, like I was just talking about, this is a multi-letter phonogram. If we wanted to signify its first sound, we'd leave it blank. If we wanted to signify its second sound, as in ooh, through, we'd put a 2 above it. And if we wanted to signify it was its third sound, as in uff or tough, we'd put a 3 above it. And ideally, you want your pencil sharper than this, but this is what I'm working with right now. Now, if you want to signify its fourth sound, as in trough, you would put a 4 above it. And if you wanted to signify its fifth sound, as in ah or sought, you'd put a 5 above it. And for the last sound, if you wanted to signify its sixth sound, its sixth and final sound, as in bow, or excuse me, as in bow. See that there, Brandon? I even messed up there. So this can be a tricky one, you guys. So as in bow, o, oo, uff, off, ah, ow, bow. So we would want to put a 6 right above that. Final phonogram of multi-letter phonograms, folks, and this is g. G of guilty guy. He looks very guilty. G. G of guilty guy. And so it has one sound, and we're going to go ahead and write this out. And we're going to go ahead and start here at 1, right on the midline, and we're going to circle on over to 2, down to the baseline to 3, and then we're going to circle right on over past 4 on the baseline, and back up to 1 on the midline. And then we're going to go down back to past the baseline, and do that little hook curve there. And then we'll start right here at the midline at 2, and trace straight down to the baseline, right to 3, and then we'll curve right on over past 4, back up to the midline at 1, and then end by coming back down to the baseline to 4. And we'll underline it because it's a multi-letter phonogram. It only has one sound, so we don't need any numbers above that phonogram. And that's it, you guys. I hope you really enjoyed this presentation on the manuscript writing portion of the multi-letter phonograms. And if you have any questions or concerns, go ahead and leave me a comment in the section below.